Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are opening up a file that is honestly a little overwhelming.
It's a big one.
It's a huge one. We're talking about a figure whose face is, it's one of the most recognizable brands on the planet.
That's a good way to put it, a brand.
You go to Vietnam today, and he is absolutely everywhere. He's on the currency, the dong. He's on posters in schoolrooms. There are statues of him in parks. He is the father of the nation. He is Uncle Ho.
It's true. He's an icon. But if you actually stop and look at the sources, the biographies, the intelligence dossiers, the history of the Indochina Wars, you realize that Uncle Ho is arguably one of the most successful and deceptively simple branding exercises of the 20th century.
That's exactly what we're digging into today. We are talking about Ho Chi Minh. And the thing that struck me immediately when I started reading through this stack is that the man we think we know is basically a collection of myths, state secrets, and deliberate misdirection. It feels like trying to grab smoke.
It is a labyrinth. And to be fair, that is exactly how you wanted it. He designed his life to be a maze.
I want to start with a specific detail from the research that just stopped me in my tracks. Because usually when we do these deep dives on historical figures, we know them by one name. Maybe they have a nickname.
Right.
But the sources suggest that Ho Chi Minh used anywhere between 50 and 200 different pseudonyms during his life.
200 is the high estimate,
Yeah.
but it's not unrealistic, no.
That is insane. I struggle to remember my passwords, and this guy had 200 different identities.
It's staggering. And he wasn't even born Ho Chi Minh, right? That name, which means he who enlightens, he didn't even start using that until he was in his 50s.
In his 50s.
Yeah. For the vast majority of his life, he was someone else. He was a ghost in the machine of global geopolitics.
And those aliases weren't just for fun, I'm guessing.
No, absolutely not. They were a survival mechanism. This is a man who spent decades running from the French colonial secret police, the Sûreté, running from British intelligence, Chinese warlords, and eventually American agencies.
He had to be a shapeshifter.
He had to be. If he stayed one person for too long, he was dead. Simple as that.
So our mission today is to try and pin down the shapeshifter. We want to peel back that kindly old Uncle Ho propaganda, but we also want to look past the Western communist boogeyman caricature to find the actual human being.
The real person in there.
Yeah, the guy who was a global traveler, a master of disguise, a ruthless political operator, and, according to one very weird report here, a pastry chef.
Allegedly a pastry chef. We will definitely get to the pastries, one of my favorite parts of the story.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand the operator, you have to understand the environment that created him. It's not a rags to riches story. It's more like, I don't know, a tragedy set in a collapsing world.
That's a very good way to frame it.
We are in central Vietnam, 1890. He's born Nguyễn Sinh Cung. What does his world look like?
It's bleak. That's the most important context.
Yeah.
He is born into a Vietnam that effectively doesn't exist anymore. It's French Indochina. The French control everything. The economy, the laws, the military. If you are Vietnamese, you are a second-class citizen in your own home. But his family background is fascinating because it straddles two worlds. His father, Nguyen Sinh Sac, was a Confucian scholar.
Which is a big deal, right? That's not just being well-read.
No. It's the elite. In the traditional Vietnamese system, if you passed the grueling civil service exams, you became a mandarin, an imperial magistrate. You were the law. You were the administration.
So young Ho, or Kung, as he was called then, he grew up steeped in this high-level Confucian education.
He did. He learned classical Chinese. He was part of the intelligentsia. He was raised to be part of the system.
But the notes here mention a scandal involving his father. It says he was dismissed in disgrace. What happened?
It was brutality. His father was an imperial magistrate, yes, but he was demoted and eventually dismissed for abuse of power. Specifically, a local figure died after receiving 102 strokes of the cane under his father's orders.
102 strokes. That is, that's essentially a death sentence by torture.
It is. And for a young boy, seeing your father, this figure who is supposed to represent moral authority, scholarship, and justice, fall from grace in such a violent public way.
And that has to leave a mark.
It leaves a huge mark. And at the same time, he's living under the thumb of French colonial oppression.
So he's seeing dysfunction from both sides.
Exactly. It creates a very specific, sharp-edged worldview. He sees the cracks in the system early on. He sees that authority is often arbitrary, cruel, and hypocritical. He realizes that the structure of power, whether it's the old feudal system of his father or the new colonial system of the French, is fundamentally broken.
He didn't just stay in that traditional bubble, though. He went to a French school, right?
He did. The College Quoc Hoc in Kew. And here is where history gives us one of those incredible coincidences.
I love these.
This is the same high school that later educated his future general, Von Nguyen Kiap, and his future archenemy, the South Vietnamese president, Nguyen Ngoc Diem.
No way! They all went to the same high school.
The very same. It was the school for the Vietnamese elite. It's like finding out that Lincoln and Jefferson Davis went to the same prep school. It shows you how small that circle actually was.
But how it didn't finish.
No. He was restless. He was kicked out for revolutionary activities, actually. He heads south to Saigon, and in 1911, at age 21, he makes a decision that changes everything.
This is the start of the adventure novel.
It really is. He walks onto a French merchant steamer, the Amiral de La Touche Treville. He signs up as a kitchen helper using the alias Van Ba, and he just sails away.
And he doesn't just go to France, which is what I would have assumed.
No, that comes later.
This is the part that really surprised me. We think of him as this insular Vietnamese nationalist, purely focused on his homeland, but he spent years wandering the globe, specifically the United States.
The American chapter is fascinating, and it is so often overlooked in the standard biographies. Between 1912 and 1913, he claims to have lived in Harlem and Boston.
Okay, you have to picture this. The future leader of communist North Vietnam, living in Harlem in the 1910s, what was he doing?
Well, he was working odd jobs. But he claimed, and this is a famous anecdote, though hard to verify with hard documentation, that he worked as a baker at the Parker House Hotel in Boston.
The place where the Parker House roll was invented.
The very same. Now, the management says they have no record of him on the payroll, but he wrote postcards to friends mentioning his work there. Whether he was a master baker or just kneading dough in the back, the experience mattered.
What mattered more, though, was what he was seeing outside the kitchen.
Absolutely. He's in America during the era of segregation.
Right.
He's seeing the land of the free, but he's also seeing the rise of black nationalism. He attended meetings of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. He was listening to Marcus Garvey.
So he's seeing that the land of the free has its own pretty glaring contradictions.
Exactly. He's seeing that oppression isn't just a Vietnamese problem. It's a global problem. He wrote essays later where he explicitly compared the plight of the Vietnamese under the French to the plight of black Americans under Jim Crow. He realized that the West had a very convenient double standard.
He then moves on to Britain. He lives in London, in West Ealing, and again we have another culinary legend.
The pastry chef story.
I love this one.
So the story goes that he trained under Auguste Escoffier, the most famous chef in the world, at the Carlton Hotel. Escoffier is the guy who invented the brigade system, the modern French kitchen, the absolute god of chefs.
Is that true? Was Ho Chi Minh making soufflés for the British aristocracy?
The evidence is scarce. It's likely he worked in the kitchen, maybe washing dishes or doing vegetable prep, a snow shoveler, some sources say. Maybe Escoffier shouted at him once or twice. But the idea that he was there, in the belly of the beast, whipping up desserts for the people who were colonizing the world, it's poetic.
It is. But what's the takeaway from all this travel? Why does it matter that he was a busboy in London or a baker in Boston?
It shattered the illusion. I mean, think about it. In Vietnam, the French were these distant, godlike masters. They were the superior race. They had the power, the technology, the wealth.
Untouchable.
Completely.
Yeah.
But in France or England or America, Ho saw white people who were poor. He saw them drunk. He saw them being stupid. He saw them serving others. He saw them as fallible human beings.
And that's a crucial psychological shift for a revolutionary.
It's everything. You stop fearing the colonizer when you realize they're just people.
So he's got the worldview, he's got the travel miles, but he's not a communist yet. He's just a patriot.
Correct. He's a nationalist looking for a solution, a tool to fix his country. And that search brings him to Paris in 1919. This is the turning point.
The end of World War I, the Versailles peace talks, the world is being redrawn.
And everyone is there. It's the center of the universe. Woodrow Wilson is there, the American president, preaching this new gospel of self-determination for nations.
A very attractive idea if you're from a colony.
You'd think so. And Ho, now calling himself Nguyen Ai Quoc, or Nguyen the Patriot, he thinks, okay, this is it. This is our chance. The Americans are talking about freedom. They will listen to us.
He drafts a petition, right? And looking at the text here, it's incredibly moderate. He isn't asking for independence. He isn't asking for a revolution.
No, not at all. He's asking for civil rights, basic stuff. Freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, equal legal standing with the French. He rents a tuxedo to look professional. He tries to get an audience with President Wilson to present this petition.
And what happens?
Nothing. He is completely ignored. He doesn't even get in the door. The American delegation just blows him off.
This is what historians call the Wilsonian moment, right? The big what if.
It's a massive what if. If Wilson had listened, if the West had acknowledged Vietnamese grievances in 1919, Ho Chi Minh might have become a pro-American liberal nationalist. The entire history of the 20th century in Southeast Asia could have been different.
But the rejection taught him a hard lesson.
It taught him that the West's talk of freedom only applied to white Europeans. It was a club, and he wasn't invited.
So, rejected by the Americans, ignored by the French government, where does he turn?
He turns to the only major power that is actually talking about colonies, the Soviet Union. He reads Lenin's draft theses on the national and colonial questions. And legend has it, he read it in his Paris apartment and shouted out loud, "This is what we need. This is the path to our liberation."
So it wasn't the economics of communism that hooked him? It wasn't about seizing the means of production or five-year plans?
Not initially, no. For him, it was a practical matter. It was Lenin's anti-colonial stance. Lenin was the only one saying, hey, we should help these colonies get free from their masters. For Ho, nationalism was the engine. Communism was just the vehicle to get there.
And he doesn't just join the club. He becomes a founding member of the French Communist Party in 1920.
Which is deeply ironic, right?
Yeah.
The Vietnamese man helping found the Communist Party of the country that is colonizing his own home. But that kicks off his next phase. He stops being the drifter, the observer.
And becomes the professional revolutionary.
Exactly.
And this is where the spy movie vibes really kick in. He goes to Moscow in 1923. He studies at the Communist University of the Toilers of the East. I love those Soviet names.
It was a training ground for Cominternasians. He learns organization, propaganda, secrecy, encryption. He learns the tradecraft. And then he's sent to China Canton to start organizing Vietnamese youth.
Now, in China, we had a controversy that really complicates his image. We're talking about the betrayal of Phan Boi Chau.
This is a heavy one. Phan Boi Chau was the old guard of Vietnamese nationalism. He was a hero, a friend of Ho's father. He was the most famous Vietnamese patriot alive.
The elder statesman.
Right. But in 1925, Chau was betrayed to the French police in Shanghai. He was arrested and sentenced to house arrest for life.
And the allegation is that Ho Chi Minh, or whatever name he was using then, sold him out.
There's a strong historical argument, though it is debated by some biographers, that Ho betrayed him for the reward money, 100,000 piastres.
Why would he do that to a fellow patriot? That sounds like something a villain does.
Pragmatism. Ruthless pragmatism. The argument is that Ho needed the money to fund his own budding communist organization. He saw it as seed money.
So the ends justify the means.
For him, yes. Plus, he believed that Phan Boi Chau's trial would stir up nationalist anger back home, which it did. And finally, Chau was the old generation. He was a monarchist reformer, and we needed to clear the deck for the new communist leadership. It was efficient.
That is ice cold. It really peels back the Uncle Ho mask. This was a guy who would do whatever it took.
Whatever it took. And that includes faking his own death.
Okay, yes. The fake death of 1932. This is my favorite part of the spy years. Walk us through this.
So it's the early 30s. He's in Hong Kong organizing. He gets arrested by the British police. The French are demanding his extradition. If he goes back to Vietnam, the French will execute him. Guaranteed.
So he's trapped.
He is, but he has a British lawyer named Frank Lusby. And Lusby actually likes him. He sees this intelligent, polite, multilingual man and decides to help. They know they can't win the legal extradition case forever, so they pull a ruse.
They just tell everyone he died.
Pretty much. It was reported that Nguyen Quoc had died of tuberculosis in prison. The news spread globally. The French rejoiced. The Soviets even held a memorial service for him in Moscow.
Meanwhile, he's where?
He's quietly slipping out of Hong Kong, disguised, making his way back to the Soviet Union. He spent the next few years in the wilderness, politically speaking, surviving the Stalinist purges. But he was alive. The world thought Nguyen Quoc was a ghost.
Which allowed him to return to Vietnam in 1941 after 30 years away and finally adopt the name we know, Ho Chi Minh.
He who enlightens, a name for a new beginning.
It's a powerful name. And he returns right into the chaos of World War II. And this leads to perhaps the most ironic chapter of his life, the time he was practically an American ally.
This is the part that drives historians of the Vietnam War crazy with frustration.
I can imagine.
In 1945, Ho is hiding in the mountains. He's fighting the Japanese who had occupied Indochina, and who drops in to help him? The OSS, the precursor to the CIA.
The DEER team. I've read about this.
Right. An OSS team parachutes in. They find Ho Chi Minh suffering from malaria and dysentery. He's barely alive, wasting away.
And an American doctor treats him?
Yes. An American doctor with the OSS likely saved Ho Chi Minh's life. They gave him medicine. They gave him weapons. They trained his Viet Minh fighters. Ho Chi Minh was referred to by OSS agents as Agent 19.
That is mind-boggling considering what happens 20 years later. The U.S. saved the man they would later spend billions trying to destroy.
It is the ultimate irony of the war. And Ho leans into this. He thinks, the Americans are anti-colonial. They fought the British. They're fighting the Japanese. They're going to help me get rid of the French for good.
And this culminates in the Declaration of Independence on September 2, 1945.
Picture the scene. Badin Square in Hanoi. Hundreds of thousands of people. Ho Chi Minh steps up to the microphone, and the very first words out of his mouth are, all men are created equal. They are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights.
He's quoting Thomas Jefferson, verbatim.
He is quoting the American Declaration of Independence. It was a strategic move, of course, a direct appeal. He was signaling to the U.S. He sent letter after letter to President Harry Truman. Support us. Recognize us. We can be a friend to America in Asia.
And Truman's response?
Silence. Not a single reply. The Cold War was starting. The U.S. needed France as an ally in Europe against the Soviets. They weren't going to annoy France by supporting some Vietnamese communist in the jungle.
And that silence sealed the fate of Vietnam for the next 30 years.
It did. The French returned to reclaim their colony. Hugh tried to negotiate. But when talks broke down in 1946, he knew war was inevitable. And this brings us to the First Indochina War, and that chilling quote that defines his military philosophy.
The 10-to-1 quote.
He told a French visitor, "You can kill 10 of my men for every one I kill of yours. But even at those odds, you will lose, and I will win."
It sounds like a boast, but it was actually a grim calculation.
It was a warning. He was laying out the entire strategy. He was saying, we're willing to suffer more than you are. We have nowhere else to go. You are fighting a war of choice. We are fighting for survival. Time is on my side.
And he was right.
He was right. It took 8 years, culminating in the shocking defeat of the French at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. But the Vietnamese ground them down until they quit.
But victory came with a cost. And I don't just mean soldiers. We have to talk about the governance of North Vietnam, because while the war was going on, Ho's government launched the land reform.
This is the darkest stain on his domestic record. From 1953 to 1956, the party wanted to smash the landlord class to secure control over the countryside. It was modeled on what Mao did in China.
And it got out of hand fast.
Out of hand is putting it mildly. They sent cadres into villages with quotas. They had to find a certain number of reactionary landlords to denounce.
Quotas for executions.
Essentially. Neighbors turned on neighbors. People with personal grudges made accusations. People were denounced, put on these brutal show trials in their own villages, and executed.
What are the numbers we're talking about?
Estimates vary wildly because the records are, well, they're state-controlled. Some say 13,500. Others go as high as 50,000 or even more. But the point is, thousands of innocent people, often loyal Viet Minh supporters who just happened to own a bit of land, were killed.
And Hu's reaction to this is interesting. He didn't double down. He apologized.
He did. In 1956, he initiated a correction of errors campaign. There were reports of him crying, publicly shedding tears over the mistakes that were made.
Was that genuine, or was it theater?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
He was known to be an emotional man, but he was also a master politician. The apology was brilliant politics. It helped stabilize the regime. It allowed the party to shift blame to lower-level cadres while keeping the leadership intact.
So he could say, we went too far, but the objective was still achieved.
The objective was achieved. He might have regretted the excess, but the purge itself secured the party's absolute power in the North.
Right. It cleared the board. Now, as we move into the 1960s, the era of the American war hose role starts to change. I think most people assume he was calling the shots the whole time, right up to his death.
That's the common perception, yeah. Uncle Ho leading the fight.
But the sources suggest he was actually losing power.
That's a crucial distinction. By the early 60s, Ho is in his 70s. His health is declining. He has diabetes, heart issues, and a new figure is rising in the Politburo. Le Duan.
He's the hardliner.
Extremely. There was a split in the party. You had the North First faction, which included Ho and General Dieppe. They wanted to focus on building the socialist economy in the North and proceed cautiously with reunification in the South.
The slow and steady approach.
Right. But Le Duan led the South First faction. He wanted violent, immediate reunification. He saw any delay as a betrayal.
And Le Duan won.
He did. He systematically marginalized Ho. He turned Ho into a figurehead, a living saint to inspire the troops and charm foreign diplomats, while Le Duan and the hardliners ran the war machine.
That explains why the war escalated so aggressively.
It does. In fact, there were secret peace initiatives throughout the 60s, Operation Marigold, the Seaborne Mission, where the U.S. tried to talk to Hanoi, who often seemed open to these talks, at least in principle. But the hardliners and the often terrible timing of U.S. bombing campaigns always torpedoed them. Howe's the face, but he wasn't always the hand on the wheel in those later years.
Let's pivot to the man himself, because part of the Uncle Ho brand was his personal life, or really the lack thereof. The story was that he was a celibate monk, married only to the revolution.
That was the official line. To be the father of the nation, you can't have a specific family of your own. You have to belong to everyone. It's a very potent myth.
But the reality...
The reality is he was a man. In 1926, while in China, he married a woman named Zheng Shuiming. She was a Chinese midwife.
A legal marriage with witnesses and everything?
Yes. They lived together as husband and wife. But when he had to flee China in 1927, he left her behind. He tried to reconnect later, but the party blocked it. It didn't fit the narrative they were building.
And there was another woman, right, a revolutionary.
Nguyen Thi Minh Khai, a fiery, brilliant revolutionary in her own right. They were very close, likely romantically involved in the 30s in Moscow and China. She was later captured and executed by the French. A real tragedy.
So the monk image was completely manufactured.
Entirely. The party actively suppressed these facts for decades. They needed him to be a saint, not a widower or a husband who had left his wife.
Speaking of saint-like qualities, we have to talk about his brain. The guy was a linguistic genius.
Oh, absolutely. It's astounding. We know he spoke Vietnamese and French perfectly, but he also spoke English, Russian, Cantonese, and Mandarin fluently. And get this, he spoke conversational Esperanto.
Esperanto? Really? Why?
It was popular in socialist circles at the time as a language of international brotherhood, but it just shows you his intellectual curiosity.
And he wrote poetry.
Beautiful poetry. His prison diary, written in classical Chinese while he was jailed by the Chinese nationalists in the 40s, is considered a literary masterpiece. It's not just propaganda, it's wistful, elegant poetry about nature, about longing. It shows a side of him that is very, very different from the ruthless political operator.
He just adds to the complexity. You have the poet, the baker, the spy, the general, and then finally the end. 1969, the war is raging, the U.S. is heavily involved, and Ho Chi Minh is dying.
He died on September 2nd, 1969.
Wait, September 2nd? That's National Day? That's the anniversary of his own independence declaration.
Exactly. The irony was too much for the party. They couldn't let Uncle Ho die on the day of celebration. It would ruin the holiday forever. So they lied.
They lied about the date of his death.
They announced he died on September 3rd. They held the official mourning then. It wasn't corrected until decades later. Even in death, his image was a tool for the state.
And that continues with his body. He left a will, right? He had specific instructions.
He did. He was very clear. He wanted to be cremated. He said it was more hygienic and saved farmland. He wanted his ashes divided into 3 parts. One for the north, one for the center, one for the south. He wanted to be physically reunited with the land.
And instead?
Instead, they embalmed him. They flew in Soviet experts who had worked on Lenin to preserve his body. They built a massive granite Soviet-style mausoleum in Hanoi.
The exact opposite of what he asked for.
The exact opposite. He became an idol, a permanent statue, a relic. You can go see him today. He lies there in a glass case, treated like a deity.
Which brings us to the legacy. And it's a weird one. You have the Communist Party worshiping him, but you also have actual worship, like a religion.
Yes. This is fascinating. In some folk religions in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh has been incorporated into the pantheon of spirits. There are mediums who claim to channel him. Some identify him as an incarnation of the Jade Emperor, the supreme Taoist god.
The Jade Emperor, from a guy who quoted Thomas Jefferson to a literal god? That's some journey.
It speaks to how deeply he penetrated the Vietnamese psyche. He isn't just a politician. He is an ancestor figure. He bridges that gap between the Confucian scholar official and the modern revolutionary leader.
So as we wrap up, we have to ask the big question. We've unpacked the aliases, the travels, the ruthlessness, the charm. Who was he, really? Was he a communist who used nationalism to get what he wanted? Or was he a nationalist who used communism because it was the only tool available?
That is the debate that will never end. If you look at his early life, the rejection of Versailles, the constant focus on independence, the nationalism feels primary. He was a patriot first.
But he was also a dyed-in-the-wool communist. He built a totalitarian state.
He did. He was a disciplined Leninist who believed the party was the only way to hold power and modernize the country. So he was both. The truth is he was a pragmatist. He was a chameleon. He became whatever the situation required him to be to achieve one single goal: a unified, independent Vietnam.
If the Americans had offered that in 1919 or 1945, he might have been an ally.
He very well might have been. They didn't. So he became their worst nightmare.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about ideologies, it's about timing. It's about missed connections. And it's about individuals who are willing to reinvent themselves 100 times to get what they want.
Exactly. The ultimate shapeshifter.
If you want to see a different side of the tactician, I highly recommend looking up the prison diary poetry. It's haunting stuff. It gives you a glimpse of the man inside the myth.
It really does. It's worth your time.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.